By April 9th, 1940, Germany faced an arithmetic problem that would cost them half their destroyer fleet within 4 days. 10 modern Zerstörer, destroyers representing nearly a quarter of the Kriegsmarine's entire surface striking force, had successfully delivered 2,000 mountain troops to Narvik, Norway's ice-free port controlling Swedish iron ore shipments. The invasion succeeded brilliantly. The mathematics that followed were catastrophic. Each Type 1936 destroyer consumed fuel at rates no planner had adequately calculated for the 1,200 nautical mile journey from Bremerhaven to Narvik through April storms. By the time Commodore Bonte's flotilla secured the port on April the 9th, his 10 ships were nearly empty. The operational plan had accounted for this. 2 tankers, Jan Willem and Kattegat, were dispatched to refuel the destroyers for their return journey. British submarines sank Kattegat on April the 9th. Jan Willem arrived alone, carrying 8,500 tons of fuel oil, but equipped with improvised pumping equipment designed for commercial whaling operations, not military refueling. The tanker could service only 2 destroyers simultaneously. Each refueling required 7 to 8 hours. On the morning of April the 10th, when Captain Bernard Warburton-Lee's 5 British H-class destroyers appeared through snow squalls outside Narvik harbour, the German flotilla was scattered across 3 fjords. 3 destroyers had completed refueling. 2 were mid-process. 5 waited their turn, fuel tanks reading near empty. The Royal Navy didn't attack with superior firepower. They attacked with superior timing. The ships Warburton-Lee commanded weren't impressive by any metric except availability. HMS Hardy, Havoc, Hostile, Hotspur and Hunter were H-class fleet destroyers, displacing barely 2,000 tons, significantly smaller than their German counterparts. They mounted 4 or 5 4.7-inch guns versus the Germans' 5 5-inch weapons. The German destroyers at Narvik represented extraordinary engineering. The Type 1936 class displaced 3,150 tons fully loaded, mounted 5 5-inch guns, 8 torpedo tubes, and steam turbines generating 70,000 shaft horsepower for speeds exceeding 38 knots. Each vessel cost approximately 15 million Reichsmarks, roughly $6 million in 1940 dollars, equivalent to $130 million today. Construction time averaged 18 months. At specialized yards, Germany began the war with 21 destroyers. Replacing losses would take years the Kriegsmarine didn't possess. British H-class destroyers cost approximately £300,000 each. 1/5 the German price. Construction time ran 14 to 16 months, but British yards could build them simultaneously at multiple facilities. When HMS Hardy went to war, 4 more identical vessels were already under construction. This economic disparity meant nothing at 4:30 a.m. on April the 10th, when Warburton-Lee led Hardy, Hunter and Havoc into Narvik harbour through driving snow. What mattered was that 5 British destroyers faced 5 German destroyers, 3 of which sat motionless at the pier. Wilhelm Heidkamp, Friedrich Bonte's flagship, detected nothing until British torpedoes were in the water. The attack lasted 6 minutes of absolute chaos. Hardy's opening torpedo salvo struck Wilhelm Heidkamp amidships, detonating her forward magazine. The explosion killed Kommodore Bonte and 81 crew members instantly. Anton Schmidt, moored alongside, took 2 torpedo hits and capsized within 3 minutes. Diether von Roeder managed to return fire, but absorbed multiple 4.7-inch shells that crippled her steering. The 3 British destroyers then turned on merchant vessels in the harbour. Torpedoes and gunfire sank or damaged 10 ships, 6 German, 2 Norwegian, 2 Swedish, transforming Narvik into a burning maze. At 5 a.m., Warburton-Lee ordered withdrawal. His intelligence suggested 6 German destroyers total. He just destroyed or disabled 3 and damaged 2 more. By his calculations, the mission was complete. He was catastrophically wrong. 5 more German destroyers, Wolfgang Zenker, Erich Gieser, and Erich Kowelner from Fjord, plus Georg Thiele and Bernd von Arnim from Ballingen Bay, had detected the attack and were converging on Narvik, but they faced the same arithmetic problem. Fuel. Commander Erich Bay, now senior German officer after Bonte's death, commanded destroyers with bunkers showing critical levels. Wolfgang Zenker reported less than 10% fuel remaining. Erich Kollner's engineering officer estimated 4 hours steaming at combat speed before depletion at 5:30 a.m. As Warburton-Lee's flotilla exited Narvik harbour, they ran directly into Bay's ambush. German 5-inch shells struck Hardy's Bridge at 5:42 a.m., killing Warburton-Lee and most of his command staff. The destroyer, steering disabled and fires spreading, ground ashore near Vidrek. HMS Hunter, manoeuvring to avoid Hardy, took torpedoes from Georg Thiele and capsized in minutes. HMS Hotspur absorbed severe damage but remained afloat. The tactical situation had reversed. 5 German destroyers now engaged 3 intact British vessels and 1 cripple, but Bay couldn't press the advantage. His destroyer's fuel states forbade extended pursuit. At 6:10 a.m., with British destroyers hostile and Havoc escorting the damaged Hotspur westward, Bay ordered his flotilla to break off. The German ships limped back to Narvik, having expended their last ammunition reserves and burned fuel they couldn't replace. On paper, the First Battle of Narvik was a draw. Both sides lost 2 destroyers, but the strategic mathematics told a different story. Britain lost 2 destroyers from a fleet of 184. Replacement construction was already underway at multiple yards. Within 6 months, British destroyer strength would actually increase despite losses. Germany lost 2 destroyers from a fleet of 21, with 3 more severely damaged. More critically, the surviving 8 destroyers sat trapped 1,200 miles from home, low on fuel, nearly out of ammunition, with no prospect of resupply. The British submarine HMS Truant was already prowling the approaches. Royal Navy cruisers were establishing blockade positions. Surface escape was impossible. Admiral Wilhelm Marschall requested permission to scuttle the Narvik destroyers and evacuate their crews. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder refused. The ships represented too much invested capital to abandon. That decision sealed their fate. On April the 13th, the Royal Navy returned with overwhelming force. Battleship HMS Warspite led 9 destroyers into Fjord. The German destroyers, commanded by Captain Bay with no unified strategy and critically low on ammunition, could offer only desperate resistance. Warspite's 15-inch guns announced the attack at 11:52 a.m. Her Swordfish float plane, scouting ahead, spotted U-64 on the surface and sank it with bombs, the first submarine kill by aircraft in naval history. The German destroyers scattered into side fjords, fighting individual actions with whatever ammunition remained. Hermann Kunner, Hans Ludemann, and Dieter von Roeder engaged until their magazines emptied, then beached themselves. Erich Gieser took direct hits from Warspite's main battery and exploded. Erich Kollner was caught by British destroyers and pounded into a burning wreck. The 5 surviving destroyers retreated into Rombaksfjord, the narrow waterway at Narvik's eastern extreme. There was no escape. By 3:30 p.m., all 5 had been scuttled by their own crews. The Second Battle of Narvik lasted 4 hours. 10 German destroyers, half the Kriegsmarine's entire destroyer force, were destroyed for British losses of 1 damaged destroyer, HMS Eskimo, which lost her bow but survived. The arithmetic was devastating. 10 Type 1936 destroyers represented 150 million Reichsmarks in construction costs, roughly $60 million in 1940 dollars. More critically, they represented 180 months of specialized shipyard labor. At Germany's production rate of approximately 2 destroyers per month, replacing the Narvik losses would require nearly 8 years. Britain suffered no equivalent loss. The two destroyers sunk cost £600,000 combined and would be replaced within 9 months. The exchange rate favoured Britain roughly 10-1 in both economic and time costs. The fuel crisis that doomed the German flotilla stemmed from inadequate logistical planning. Operation Weserübung prioritized speed and surprise, assuming destroyers could refuel quickly at Narvik before returning. The loss of Kattegat meant Jan Willems' inadequate pumping equipment became the bottleneck that trapped the entire flotilla. Kommodore Bonte's fatal error was scattering his destroyers across multiple fjords during refueling. With only one tanker serving 10 ships, dispersion seemed logical. When Warburton-Lee attacked, that dispersion prevented coordinated German response. Warburton-Lee's fatal error was underestimating German strength. British intelligence reported 6 destroyers at Narvik. The actual number was 10. His decision to attack a second time placed his flotilla directly in the path of 5 German ships he didn't know existed. That miscalculation cost him his life and 2 destroyers. But Warburton-Lee's sacrifice achieved strategic effect. His attack forced the Germans to expend their remaining fuel and ammunition, eliminating any possibility of escape. His posthumous Victoria Cross, Britain's first of the war, recognized not tactical brilliance but strategic impact. The broader Norwegian campaign dragged on for 2 months. German mountain troops under General Edward Dietl held Narvik until early June, supplied by Luftwaffe transport aircraft. French, Polish, British and Norwegian forces eventually recaptured the town on June 8th. But by then, France was collapsing. British forces evacuated Norway on June the 9th, abandoning Narvik days after capturing it. Germany won the Norwegian campaign strategically. They secured Swedish iron ore shipments and established naval bases, but they paid an extraordinary price. The Kriegsmarine entered the Norwegian campaign with 21 destroyers. They emerged with 11. 10 were gone at Narvik. German destroyer production couldn't make good these losses. Throughout 1940 and 1941, only 4 new destroyers joined the fleet. By mid-1942, the Kriegsmarine possessed fewer destroyers than at war's outbreak. This attrition crippled German surface operations for the war's duration. Every destroyer lost at Narvik was one that couldn't screen battleship operations, couldn't escort convoys, couldn't oppose British raids. The mathematics were unforgiving. Warships lost faster than industry could replace them meant steadily shrinking capability. For the men who survived Narvik, the experience taught brutal lessons. Lieutenant Hans-Werner Lerche, engineering officer aboard Erich Gieser, watched his ship's fuel gauges during the 5 days between battles. "We knew we were trapped," he wrote. "By April the 12th, we had perhaps enough fuel to reach the fjord's entrance. Not enough to fight, not enough to escape. We were simply waiting for the inevitable." When Warspite's Swordfish appeared on April 13th, Lerche understood what it meant. A battleship. We were destroyers with empty magazines and near-empty bunkers facing a battleship with unlimited ammunition. It wasn't combat, it was execution. Commander Eric Bay submitted his final report before scuttling his ship. The document, recovered from German archives, was clinically precise. Fuel depletion prevented concentrated defense. Ammunition depletion prevented sustained resistance. Destroyers operating beyond resupply range cannot survive determined enemy attack. Operational planning must account for logistics, not merely tactical execution. That sentence serves as the epitaph for the entire Narvik operation. Germany executed a brilliant tactical invasion. Then logistics, the unglamorous mathematics of fuel consumption and refueling rates, transformed tactical success into strategic catastrophe. The British learned different lessons. Warburton-Lee's Victoria Cross became a symbol of aggressive action despite uncertain intelligence. His decision to attack immediately, rather than waiting for reinforcements, aligned with Royal Navy doctrine. When opportunity presents, exploit it decisively. But the Admiralty also noted what worked less gloriously. The H-class destroyers performed adequately but not brilliantly. Against better commanded German forces with adequate fuel and ammunition, the outcome might have reversed. What proved decisive wasn't ship quality, but numerical superiority in the second battle. 9 British destroyers supported by a battleship overwhelmed 8 German destroyers low on ammunition. Quantity had achieved what quality might not have. This philosophy would define British naval construction for the war's remainder. Build adequate ships in overwhelming numbers, accept that individual vessels might be outgunned, win through sheer availability. By 1945, the final accounting was complete. Germany commissioned 42 destroyers during the entire war. Britain launched 378 fleet destroyers and destroyer escorts between 1939 and 1945. The production ratio was nearly 9-1. Germany lost 55 destroyers during the war. Britain lost 153, but British construction outpaced losses by 225 vessels. German construction fell short by 13. The mathematics of industrial warfare were absolute. The 10 destroyers lost at Narvik, Z-17, Dieter von Roeder, Z-18, Hans Ludemann, Z-19, Hermann Kuhner, Z-21, Wilhelm Heidkamp, Z-22, Anton Schmidt, Z-2, Georg Thiele, Z-9, Wolfgang Zenker, Z-11, Bernd von Arnim, Z-12, Erich Giese, Z-13, Erich Kellner, represented Germany's inability to wage attritional naval warfare. Each was a masterpiece of engineering. Collectively, they were irreplaceable. Captain Bernard Warburton-Lee became a hero because his sacrifice mattered strategically. His attack forced the German flotilla to expend resources they couldn't replace in a location they couldn't escape. That was worth 2 destroyers, and his life wars aren't won by perfect tactics or superior ships. They're won by arithmetic. When one side can absorb losses, the other cannot. When one side replaces ships faster than the other sinks them, victory becomes mathematical inevitability. At Narvik, in the cold waters of Fjord, where 10 German destroyers still rest, that arithmetic was written in steel and blood. The Royal Navy understood it, the Kriegsmarine learned it, and for the German sailors who watched their fuel gauges drop to empty while British reinforcements gathered offshore, the lesson was inescapable. In modern war, logistics matters more than courage, and quantity defeats quality when quality can't be sustained. The Battle of Narvik didn't change the war's outcome, but it revealed truths about industrial warfare that would define the war's course. That tactical brilliance means nothing without strategic sustainability, and that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't firepower or armor, it's simply having more ships than your enemy can sink faster than you can build them.